Welcome to this presentation of the book by David Fernández Rojo. This is an activity organized in the framework of our LLM in International Legal Studies, offered by Deusto Law School. And we are very happy, we are extremely happy to give the opportunity today to David Fernández, who is a lecturer of our LLM, of our school. And again, we are very happy to give him the floor to present a very interesting book. Well, David Fernández Rojo studied law at Deusto Law School some years ago, and then he did a master's program in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands, on European law and international law. And currently, he is a research and assistant professor at the University of Deusto, where he teaches international law and also international protection of human rights. At the same time, he is a key researcher in the Monnet network, European Union Asia-Pacific Dialogue, and he's also the coordinator at the University of Deusto of the Monnet networks on EU law enforcement and on EU counterterrorism. Well, today we are going to present a very timely book on a very hot topic, especially taking into account the controversies that have surrounded the operation of some of these EU agencies on migration in the last week and in the last month. And this book analyzes and explores the evolution of the operational tasks and cooperation of the so-called European migration agencies, namely FRONTEX, the most well-known, EASO and EUROPOL. So David, thank you for participating. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And David will intervene around 30-40 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for comments, questions from the public. So thank you, David, and you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Felipe. Let me share my screen. Let's see if it works. Yeah, I think everybody can see it. So, well, thank you very much, Felipe, for your kind introduction. It's actually a great pleasure for me to be presenting my book in my home university. So I have very fond memories, of course, not only of being a student here, but also growing up here afterwards as a PhD researcher and now as an assistant professor. So it is, as I was saying, a great pleasure for me. And I would also like to, now that I'm presenting the book, acknowledge or to say how grateful I am for all the support I have received from the Faculty of Law and specifically the University of Deusto during these years. As you were saying, today, basically, I'm going to be presenting a book that took almost 5 years to prepare and focuses on a very timely topic that is the EU migration agencies and specifically two tasks, or basically two subtopics that are the operations and the cooperation of FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL. Just for those of you who are interested in this topic, I have published very recently in the EU law analysis blog of the Professor Steve Pierce a summary of what the key elements of this book. So if you are interested in this topic and to know a little bit more about the book, you can always go to the EU law analysis blog post to have a look at it, since I have summarized there the key points of the book. But without further ado, I always like to start my presentation by saying that this book is framed under the refugee crisis. And that was a very interesting time to write this book, but at the same time, very challenging. Since the European Commission was being very active in promoting new measures, new policies, and definitely adopting or trying to put forward new regulations. So that made the book, I think, very interesting, but also very challenging to be written. I'm not going to go over the figures that you can see in the slides, but basically we were facing in the European Union in 2015 a refugee crisis. The figures expanded in a way that were unprecedented, and that's why the European Commission decided to put forward to table the European Agenda on Migration. So what is the book about? So basically the book is divided in six chapters. The first one and the last one, obviously the first one is devoted to the introduction, the last one is devoted to the conclusion. And the second chapter starts by analyzing the establishment of FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL. And basically there I focus on analyzing the operational tasks that were initially delegated, conferred to these three agencies. In the third chapter, what I do is to analyze the expansion of the operational mandate of these agencies, so the transformation of these agencies and the new regulations that were put forward. Then in the fourth chapter of the book, what I do is to analyze something that is quite new and revolutionary, that is the multilateral operational cooperation of these three agencies on the ground in the hotspots, in the Italian and Greek hotspots that were established in the aftermath of the refugee crisis. And then in the fifth chapter, what I do is to underline the main limitations to the expansion of the operational tasks and cooperation of these agencies. So very briefly, I will do this throughout the presentation. Well, for those of you who are not familiar with these agencies, we're talking about EU migration agencies, and in my book, and this is something that is also new, that was not done before, I analyzed throughout the book the three agencies comparatively the whole time. So this is the first time that the three agencies are analyzed in a comparative way throughout the whole book. So there has been studies of FRONTEX and EASO and EUROPOL separately, but this is the first time that the three agencies are analyzed at the same time. So as I was saying, for those of you who are not familiar with these three agencies, FRONTEX is a European Union agency that was established basically to assist the member states in border management. EASO is the agency that is in charge of assisting the member states in terms of asylum when the states are facing extraordinary pressure in the asylum system. Basically, EASO helps them. And EUROPOL is the police office of the European Union. It tackles or covers several crimes, but in my book, obviously, I only focus on one crime, that is the migrant smuggling one, because it's connected with the tasks of FRONTEX and EASO. And what I do is basically I analyze the transformation of these agencies. So FRONTEX was transformed into the European Border and Coast Guard in 2016. EASO, there was also a regulation or a proposal to transform EASO was also tabled by the Commission in 2016. And EUROPOL was also transformed in 2016, and the European Migrant Smuggling Center was established. So very briefly, let me go through these agencies that I analyzed and to know the importance of them. So EUROPOL and basically the new European Migrant Smuggling Center that was established with the new regulation of EUROPOL in 2016, basically is going to tackle what you can see in the slide. And it is very important to notice that over 90% of the migrants declare to have used facilitating services to travel to the EU. 90% of them. And when we look at the turnover of this business, in 2015 alone, we're talking between 3 and 6 billion euro with these, 3 and 6 billion euros. So it was very important for EUROPOL to set up, to establish this European Migrant Smuggling Center to try to stop the smuggling business of migrants. As you can see there, the EUROPOL Migrant Smuggling Center that I analyze in depth in the book, basically what it does is to help to assist the member states in the national investigations of migrant smuggling. So they can provide intelligence, information, also operational assistance directly on the ground, for instance, in the hotspots in Italy and in Greece. Then if we look at FRONTEX, and this is something that I do in the book, I analyze the evolution of FRONTEX throughout the years. FRONTEX was established as an EU decentralized agency in 2004. In 2007, 2011, the agency was transformed, and basically the idea was to make the agency more autonomous or to depend less on the equipment and the staff of the member states, to be a more autonomous, independent agency. In the aftermath of the refugee crisis, really, it was when FRONTEX was transformed. So in 2016, a new regulation was adopted, and FRONTEX was transformed in what we call nowadays the European Border and Coast Guard. Not only that, but in 2019, a new regulation was put forward, and again, the European Border and Coast Guard was again transformed, and the mandate of the agency expanded. And in order to refer to it, I refer to it as the European Border and Coast Guard 2.0, so the new version of that border agency that was established in 2016. Since I don't have a lot of time, of course, I cover in depth all the operational tasks and all the new activities that FRONTEX, that the new European Border and Coast Guard can conduct. But I focus here on the most challenging one that was introduced in the regulation of 2019. According to the regulation 2019-1896, this regulation confers executive powers subject to the authorization of the member state that is hosting the operation that is coordinated by the agency to the European Border and Coast Guard's standing corps deployed as team members. So basically, the staff members, the border guards of the agency, now they're going to be able to conduct executive tasks under the authorization of the member state that is hosting the operation. And this is revolutionary. Why? Because these staff members of the European Border and Coast Guard, they're going to be able to conduct tasks such as the ones that you can see in the slide, like verifying the identity and nationality of arriving migrants, authorizing or refusing the entry upon border check, stamping the travel documents, issuing refusal of visas, patrolling, registering finger trips. Basically, what we can see in Spain that are the tasks of Policía Nacional, Guardia Civil. So basically, those type of prerogatives are going to be delegated to the agency. Very important, and I would like to stop here saying that these executive powers, it's true that they are going to ensure a more effective, integrated, supranational administration of the European external borders, but we cannot deny that these new tasks, they entail a very wide and open degree of discretion, and this is important to know. And then we are going to have to decide, or we have to analyze whether these new discretionary powers can be limited and whether they're balanced with sufficient accountability mechanisms within the renewed regulation of Frontex. And I would like to stress something else. The new regulations that were adopted in regards to Frontex, what they try to do is to tackle the implementation deficit. So the European Union was saying, or the Commission in particular was saying, well, we have a problem of implementation. We adopt a lot of EU measures, but the problem is that the states do not implement these measures as effectively and uniformly as we would like them to do. And the agencies are going to work in that way, supporting the states in order to effectively and uniformly implementing those EU measures adopted by the European Union. So what I do in the fifth chapter, and I do it now all together in the presentation to make it easier to follow, is what about these new executive tasks? If we look at the EU treaties, I mean, does primary law, do the treaties provide a sufficiently clear legal basis for the partial or full conferral of executive enforcement powers to the border agents of the agency? And we have to conclude that no. According to the treaties, to a strict interpretation of the treaties, these type of powers cannot be conferred fully to the agencies. Why? Because the treaties say that the member states are ultimately responsible for their own internal security, and of course, the Article 73 of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union reserves the member states the power to organize forms of administrative cooperation aimed at the safeguarding of national security. What does this mean? That we always need to have the host member state of the operation controlling executive tasks that are going to be performed by the agency. So to read it in another way, we have not established federal agencies in the European Union. The states still have, or they have exclusive competence of executive powers in terms of border management, but the agency is going to support, with the permission of the state that is hosting the operation, is going to conduct its executive powers. Same structure, just for everybody to follow in regards to the other agency, that is the European Asylum Support Office. It was established in 2010, but basically we started to hear much more about the EASO in the aftermath of the refugee crisis, and basically in the Italian and the Greek hotspots. Why? Because in Italy and Greece, they were facing extraordinary, exceptional migratory flows, and basically the agency, the European Asylum Support Office, what was doing is to provide these states help in the asylum procedure in order to determine whether one person that is claiming to be an asylum seeker, whether that person has that right or not. Something I would like to stress is that in 2016, the European asylum package was put forward by the Commission. And in that package, or within that package, the transformation of EASO into the European Union Agency for Asylum was tabled. However, that package has not been adopted. And of course, the new European Union Agency for Asylum has not been adopted yet. We are in 2021, and we do not know yet whether this new regulation is going to be adopted. And I always stop when I present the book, or when I present something related to the book, saying, look at the difference. FRONTEX has been transformed twice, in 2016 and in 2019. However, the agency that is in charge of protecting the migrants has not been transformed yet. So we had two proposals in 2016, one in 2016 and another one in 2018. However, in 2021, we still have the same regulation that we had in 2010 establishing EASO. So two priorities, two very different priorities: securitization, FRONTEX, we transform the agency; protection, EASO, we do not transform the agency. I'm not criticizing that, but it's important to notice that the priorities of the member states and the European Union are different. Again, as I did with FRONTEX, so let me focus on one particular thing or one particular task that the proposal put forward by the Commission in 2016 and 2018 is seen for this new agency. So basically, if we look at the proposal of September 2018, there we can see that for the new European Union Agency for Asylum, the teams that are deployed by this agency are going to be able to carry out the admissibility and substantive interview, assess the evidence, and prepare decisions on applications for international protection. These are crucial tasks when we think about determining the asylum application of one applicant. And we are going to, or the proposal aims to confer this task to the agency. Again, we have to think whether this discretionary power can be delegated, can be conferred to this agency. And as I did with FRONTEX, does primary law provide a sufficiently clear legal basis for the partial or full conferral of executive powers in asylum to the new European Union Agency for Asylum? And this is something that I insist I do in Chapter 5. Can these agencies do all this? Do we have federal agencies? Because if we look at the rhetoric of the Commission, it seems that we have agencies that are almost federal agencies, like the ones we can find in the United States of America. However, very clearly, Article 78 of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union states that the EU shall adopt measures comprising criteria and mechanisms for determining, and this is important, which member state is responsible for considering an application for asylum or subsidiary protection. So basically, the treaties are saying, wait a minute, the states are the ones who are in charge of determining and considering an application for asylum or subsidiary protection. And the only thing that the agency is going to be able to do in this process is to support the member states. So again, we're talking about support, assisting the states, not fully delegating these powers to the agencies. And again, I will not analyze in depth this point, but for those of you who are EU lawyers, we cannot stop our analysis only on what the treaties have to say about these new tasks, operational tasks that might be conferred to the agencies, but also to the non-delegation doctrine. Basically, the non-delegation doctrine of the Court of Justice of the European Union states that the rule-making responsibilities cannot be delegated. And what I do in the book is to analyze or to try to analyze the non-delegation doctrine of the Court of Justice of the European Union that has basically been implemented or applied to internal market agencies. What I do in the book is to apply this logic, this non-delegation doctrine, to the area of freedom, security, and justice agencies, namely FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL. And the conclusion is that we have to be very cautious when we apply this non-delegation doctrine, or to say it in another way, we have to apply this non-delegation doctrine of the Court of Justice of the European Union in a more strict way when we refer to FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL. And the reason is very simple. Why? Because these agencies may have a direct effect on the fundamental rights of the individuals that they are going to be assisted. That makes these agencies different. So that's why limiting the discretionary powers of these agencies is essential. Or, to say it in other words, we need to establish, or we need to balance the new regulations of these agencies with sufficient mechanisms of accountability that, of course, are going to ensure that the fundamental rights of the individuals that they are assisting are not violated. And let me focus on the other part of the book. So as I said at the beginning, the book focuses on two things, the operations of the agencies and then the cooperation. And it's the first time that this is done. This is the first time that it is analyzed the multilateral operational cooperation of these three agencies. And for everybody to understand, if we have, I don't like the word there, problem, but I think is easier to understand. If we have a challenge, like for instance, we have a situation in which we have an exceptional and extraordinary flow of migrants arriving at the borders of one state. This is a challenge that affects two policy fields. It might affect border management and migration, and it's going to affect asylum. Those are two two policy fields that are different. The challenge is the same one. We have one challenge that is an arrival of a lot of migrants, but we have different policy fields in the European Union. So my analysis is, what is the approach? And I analyzed in the book that there are three approaches to this type of situations. The first one is no cooperation at all. So we have one agency, FRONTEX, focuses on border management. We have another agency, EASO, focuses on asylum. They don't talk, they don't coordinate, they don't cooperate. They just focus on their own tasks. Another option will be to create an interagency cooperation, to establish mechanisms of cooperation in order to, of course, if we have a challenge like border migrants arriving at the border, let's force these two agencies to cooperate in whatever way. And the third option, when we are facing a common challenge, will be to merge the agencies. Why don't we create a super agency? We merge FRONTEX and EASO, and then, of course, the coordination would be perfect. So what has it been the approach of the European Union? The approach of the European Union has been the second one, interagency cooperation. And how? Interagency cooperation has taken place on the ground through the hotspots. So in the aftermath of the refugee crisis in 2015, in the EU migration agenda, basically the Commission said, you know, we are going to assist the member states directly on the ground, and we are going to establish something that are referred as hotspots. So basically the agencies, FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL, the ones I analyzed in the book, they are deployed on the ground, and they directly assist, operationally assist Italy and Greece, because these were the two states that required the European Commission to establish the hotspots. They directly assisted Italy and Greece. These three agencies assisted from Italy and Greece. What do these agencies do? Basically, they do, in order not to extend my presentation for a very long time, what they do is they conduct their operational activities, the ones that I have presented earlier, but what they do is they do it in a coordinated manner. So they are in a European Union regional task force, so that's what you see in the slide in the middle, the EURTF, that's the EU regional task force. That's basically a task force that is in charge of operationally coordinating the activities that the agencies are going to perform on the ground. So, for instance, think about disembarkation. So FRONTEX is going to be coordinating that. Some of those migrants that has just been disembarked, they need or they're going to require to be considered asylum seekers. That's when EASO will be supporting the Greece or Italy, but also Europol might be able to interview some of the migrants, asking them about if they have resorted to criminal networks in order to come to the European Union, all that. I will not extend on that, but there's a huge chart flow that explains how in each process the agencies will be assisting these two states, Italy and Greece, I insist, on the ground. What I do in the book is basically to analyze whether there is a gap between what these agencies were doing de facto on the ground and what they are supposed to do de jure if we look at the regulations. And this seemed to be a problem. Why? Because these three agencies were doing more than what they were supposed to do de facto on the ground, than what the regulations allow them to do. And that's a problem. When in law we have a gap between what you're supposed to do de jure and you do more de facto, there's a problem. If we think about FRONTEX, think about the strong recommendatory powers that FRONTEX has in the hotspot if there is a potential incorrect registration of nationality of an irregular migrant. Well, this is going to mess up the whole process, even the asylum process, for instance. But, and this is something I always focus a lot on the explanation. Just think about Greece and Italy. The migratory pressure that they were facing. We always say, well, you know, of course, these are not federal agencies. They are in charge of controlling what these agencies are doing on the ground. Yeah, but if you're facing an extraordinary migratory pressure, we cannot even think that all the border guards of Italy and Greece, they're going to be effectively controlling what every single border staff member of FRONTEX is doing on the ground. That's literally impossible. They are deployed just to assist Italy and Greece in a situation that they cannot cope. So, and we are asking that the agencies are going to, or we are really thinking that there is going to be a very strict and tight control of the operations and activities of the border guards of the agency on the ground? Not really. Same situation with Europol. With the Europol, the situation is even worse because we know that Europol is deployed on the ground, but there is total secrecy or lack of transparency about what this agency is doing on the ground. So if we don't know what this agency is doing on the ground, how can we control what this agency is doing? It's literally impossible. So if there is a violation of a fundamental right by this agency, who is responsible? If we don't know, if there is no access at all to know what this agency is doing on the ground. And the same situation with EASO. EASO was an agency that it was basically on the hotspots, and in particular in the Greek hotspots, assisting Greece in the asylum process. So detecting vulnerabilities, determining whether one asylum seeker should be considered as such as an asylum seeker or beneficiary of the consideration of refugee status. And you will ask me, yes, but David, you are contradicting yourself. You said that the member state, Italy or Greece, and now let's focus on Greece because this is where it happened, Greece is going to be tightly controlling what the agency is doing. Well, in practice, what we have seen is EASO conducting their interviews and basically writing down a recommendation saying whether this person should be considered an asylum seeker or not. And the authorities in Greece rubber stamping the recommendation of EASO. So the formality is met. Of course, yes, we have the stamp of Greece and the determination of the status of the migrant has been conducted by Greece. But in practice, the whole decision has been adopted, has been conducted by the agency. So then, how do we control the agency? Because who is responsible then? The member state that basically everything that is doing is rubber stamping the recommendation. And we have to be understanding. I mean, just think about Greece and the migratory pressure at the moment. They could not do more. But then if there is an error, a problem, during that determination conducted by the agency, how do we control it? Do we have enough mechanisms to control something that the agency in principle should not do according to the regulation? That's a problem. Again, the agency is doing more in practice, de facto on the ground, than what is supposed if you look at the regulation of the agency. So just to conclude or to start the conclusions of the book. In the book, I identify two main trends, two novel trends that were not identified before. The first one is that the tasks of FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL have now clear operational nature on the ground. These agencies are no longer technical agencies that are informing the states. No. They conduct extremely important operational tasks on the ground. As I say there, these agencies, these EU migration agencies, are increasingly involved in guaranteeing the effective and uniform implementation of the EU migration, asylum, and border management measures, and of course ensuring that the member states with their actions or omissions do not jeopardize the Schengen system and the common European asylum system. That's the first trend that I identify in the book. The second trend I identify in the book, and this is revolutionary, and you know, Felipe, I'm working in Utrecht with this network about EU law enforcement, which is revolutionary approach, but I never thought that this was going to take place in EU migration. But in EU migration, asylum, and border management, we are also seeing that the long-standing notion of administrative and implementation power in the area of freedom, security, and justice matters is shifting. So before, the member states were exclusively responsible of implementing nationally the measures adopted at the EU level. Now, this implementation is becoming a shared task between the European Union and the member states. Why? And I insist about something I said at the beginning. The concern of the Commission and the European Union was like, our measures are wonderful. The problem is that these measures are not being effectively and uniformly implemented nationally and locally. So let me establish some agencies or reinforce the mandate of these agencies to ensure that these measures, EU measures, are adopted, are implemented in the way I want them to be implemented. So for those of you who are more visual, this is basically what the book demonstrates. That we are moving from member state implementation and technical assistance. So that's how the evolution in the book tries to demonstrate that we are moving from technical assistance and member state implementation. And now we are more in EU implementation and operational tasks. And that's what you can see throughout the whole book when I analyze the three agencies. So let me conclude with, this is the two more slides and I conclude with my presentation. I always have this thought-provoking question. So towards fully fledged EU migration agencies, because just look at the name. FRONTEX has been transformed into a European Border and Coast Guard agency. It sounds pretty federal for me. If it's not, I mean, at least the name sounds federal, as a federal agency. And I have to disappoint some people. No, we do not have federal agencies. In the management board of the agency, so basically we have management boards that basically govern what these agencies can do and the operations that they can undertake. The member states, they have ensured that they have majority in the management boards. So the Commission only has 2 representatives and no representatives of the European Parliament in the management boards of FRONTEX and EASO. And if we talk about the EUROPOL, it's even worse. Only 1 representative of the Commission and no representative of the European Parliament. And then each member state has 1 vote. So therefore, the states are in majority. We don't have federal agencies. Why? Because the states still determine what these agencies are going to do on the ground. If there's not a majority of the states agreeing to that, well, sorry, but this is not going to go. And the second part that is important to notice is, I have no problem about reinforcing the operations and the tasks of these agencies. What we have to think is, are these tasks balanced with sufficient accountability mechanisms? So if we know that these agencies are going to directly affect the fundamental rights of individuals, do we have sufficient clear accountability mechanisms ensuring that the fundamental rights of these individuals are protected? And I don't have a lot of time to elaborate on this, but the quick answer would be no, unfortunately not. So the conclusion that I want everybody to have very clear: FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL are neither conferred decision-making powers nor executive or enforcement powers. And very important, we have to be paying a lot of attention continuously about what these agencies are supposed to do de jure and what they are actually doing on the ground. Because if there is a gap, then we have accountability issues, transparency issues that we really need to face. And I always finish my presentations, whenever I talk about FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL, everybody's like, this is a mess. Why? And this is something that, and I will just finish with an anecdote that happened to me when I was doing my PhD research stays in the US. One professor told me, I don't understand the problem. So why all this mess? If you have a federal agency, the agency conducts an operation and is responsible. Very easy. So operation, responsible, you take it to court, period. In the European Union, it's way more difficult. Why? Because FRONTEX, EASO, and EUROPOL reveal the difficulty to strike a balance between designing an effective integrated strategy for the management of migration and asylum, and of course, the member states' resistance, reluctance to confer operational powers directly linked to their core national sovereignty. We cannot forget this. We are talking about a shared competence, migration, asylum, and border management. Member states do not want to give full powers to EU agencies. These are core national sovereign powers. Of course, the states want to control. And if we think about elections and everything, I mean, no state will be like, oh, yes, of course, no, we're going to have agencies that are going to decide everything in terms of migration, asylum, and border management. No, they want to control. So that's why we have created this weird system, if I can say so, in which the agencies are in between the European Union and the member states. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, David, thank you very much for your very comprehensive and thought-provoking presentation. And now I'm sure that people from the audience are looking forward to making comments, questions, and David will be happy to respond to it. Any comment, any question from the audience? Because perhaps to start breaking the ice, I'd like to know, David, I mean, you mentioned it during your presentation, the differences and the eventual similarities between the US approach and the EU approach. What are the key differences between the two systems, the two approaches? Because in the end, you said, well, but this is a mess. Mm-hmm. Is it a mess at the other side of the Atlantic, or what's the approach in the US?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we think about the US, we have fundamental rights issues in the US, and we think about the agencies that we have there, ICE, CBP. I mean, those agencies, of course, they violate fundamental rights, and that's not going to be the focus. Those violations exist. If we think about the agencies, they're more effective in the US. Why? Because they're federal agencies. We have federal agencies in charge of migration, border management, and asylum. So then the chain of responsibility is way easier. We have this agency, it has executive powers, therefore you can take it to court, and then that agency will be fully accountable or not. But that's something that we're not going to understand. We're not going to focus on. However, the problem in the European Union is this legal fiction that we have established. The states are facing transboundary challenges, because that's what migration, border management, asylum at the end of the day is. So one state cannot tackle these challenges by itself. So it needs the coordination and cooperation. It needs the solidarity of all the states. However, the states do not want to confer full operational tasks, confer all the tasks in migration, asylum, and border management to the member states. Why? Because they are, as I said at the end, these are core sovereign powers. So we need to establish this legal fiction. We have shared competences between the European Union and the states. And we need to find a way in which the measures that are adopted at the EU level are effectively and uniformly implemented on the ground. The tool or the tools that we have found out to be working, because the member states like the agencies and the European Union like the agencies too, are the agencies in the European Union. Are they ineffective? They are. But I think we are moving towards more federalization. Just look at the executive powers of the European Border and Coast Guard. I mean, we're moving towards federalization. Still, of course, we have the member states that are going to be behind and authorizing these executive powers, but we are moving towards federalization. The problem is, according to the current treaties that we have, there's not much more room of maneuver. You need to amend the treaties if you want these agencies to have more exclusive competences or more enforcement competences or more coercive competences. And that's something that I devoted a lot of time in the book to analyze. The limitations to keep expanding the mandate of these agencies, because it seemed that in the aftermath of the refugee crisis, everything will fly. Well, yeah, we have some limitations, the Nondelegation Doctrine, the treaties. I mean, of course, I understand that some states were very eager to receive the support of the agencies, but there are some limitations. If we continue to have migration, asylum, and border management as a shared competence between the states and the European Union, that's something that we have to abide by. So.
Okay, if you have a question, you can also use the chat if you want to. Well, if not, David, I also have another question, another comment from a human rights point of view.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are the mechanisms in place to safeguard basic human rights, especially in operational terms? Are they, first of all, accountable? But second, what are the mechanisms? What are the strict measures taken into put in place?
Well, thank you very much, Solita, because that's one of the key questions. So when I was saying the whole time in the presentation about are these new tasks balanced with sufficient accountability mechanisms, and of course, one of the main things that we have to focus on are fundamental rights. So in the book, I do not focus on the judicial redress. I do not focus on that. There's other authors that have focused on different legal judicial pathways that you can follow in order to try to hold the agencies accountable. So far, I will advance, or I will say that not very successful. It's very difficult to hold these agencies accountable because they always say, well, I'm sorry, but is the member state the one that should be responsible? I'm just assisting, I'm supporting. But even if we think about the articles of international responsibility, you know, there's some cooperation, there's some coordination, and the agencies are also involved in all this. But I will not open that because, again, it's not part of the book, but I will focus more on the mechanisms that were established inside the agencies to try to provide some administrative redress. So the new European Border and Coast Guard, what it has is they established a new individual complaint mechanism. Before, FRONTEX had several mechanisms of fundamental rights, a fundamental rights officer, a consultative forum. But basically in 2016, the European Parliament and the European Ombudsman said, well, I'm sorry, but if you're going to expand to this extent the operational tasks of FRONTEX, you need to include more accountability mechanisms. And the one that they included was the individual complaint mechanism. And actually, that's something that I am working now on. That will be the spin-off of the book, to put it in a way. So what I'm working on is on all the complaints that have been submitted to FRONTEX, to the European Border and Coast Guard, since the individual complaint mechanism was established, to see how efficient the mechanism is. So how many complaints, how many of them are admissible, how many of them are inadmissible, to try to see whether this system is interesting and the states, the individuals, they trust it. Unfortunately, there is a problem with this mechanism. There is not much transparency about how to use it. And the issue that I am seeing is that it is not very useful to resort to this mechanism. Why? Because it's an internal administrative mechanism. So it's basically the agency determining whether the own agency is responsible. And then there's a tug of war here, of course. The executive director does not want to have any issue with the member states. Again, we have staff members that are working with the agency, and then, of course, we need to protect them in a way. So the conclusion that we can reach about individual complaint mechanism is that it is efficient as long as the member states want it to be efficient. So if we have one member state that does not want to collaborate with the fundamental rights officer in order to determine whether a staff member that was deployed in a joint operation of the agency is responsible or not, there's not much to do. So if the state does not want to cooperate, there is not much we can do about it. So there are ways to improve this. There are ways in which we could say, well, the agency could be held directly responsible, provide some financial compensation, for instance. Something that is now at stake is the executive director of FRONTEX. So the executive director of FRONTEX will come to you, and this is established in the regulation of FRONTEX, is that if the executive director is aware that some fundamental rights violations are taking place on the ground, the executive director must suspend, terminate, or withdraw the financial support that is provided to the member state. And this is something that the executive director of FRONTEX is not doing. So the fundamental rights officer is saying, well, I think in this area, in the Balkans, for instance, some fundamental rights are being violated. You should stop this operation of FRONTEX. The executive director has refused to do so. But again, we have to think about the executive director. Who appoints the executive director? The management board. Who is in charge of the management board? Who are behind the management board? The member states are in majority. So again, the member states are not stupid. I mean, many times people ask me questions in a way that, well, of course, member states are not going to fully delegate powers that touch upon their national sovereignty. They're not going to do that. They control very tightly and very strictly what these agencies can do and they cannot do. So they have not established these agencies in order to make the states more responsible. No. It's the opposite way. There's more blame shifting. Oh, it was FRONTEX. Oh, it was the member states. And at the end of the day, the accountability is blurred and no one is responsible. So it works in favor of the states and, of course, the agencies.
Well, if nobody has a question, any question from the audience?
Yeah, so we have one question. Manuela Sanchez Gomez. So thanks, David, for your presentation. From your point of view, what could have been done differently in the new Migration and Asylum Pact to reinforce the role of FRONTEX? How do you assess the mandate to strengthen FRONTEX EASO and EUROPOL cooperation with their countries? Well, this is a very interesting question, Manuela, that touches upon something that I was mentioning at the beginning of the presentation. We have two regulations amending the mandate of FRONTEX, one in 2016 and another one in 2019. And we have had a proposal to transform EASO since 2016. Nowadays it's 2021, and we do not have that new regulation of the European Union Agency for Asylum adopted yet. If we look at the pact, the approach is the same. Securitization, returns, removals, and not so much attention to protection. And if we look at the pact, one of the main priorities will be, let's adopt the asylum package now. We know that one of the main issues of the refugee crisis was that we have a Dublin system that doesn't work, that is fully ineffective. And if you look at the pact, that's not the priority. The priority continues to be securitization of the borders, return, removals. And to answer to your second question, Manuela, if we look at the pact goes in that way. More cooperation and more collaboration with third states, but precisely to return the migrants, to remove them from the member states. That's the collaboration that we want to have with third states. Or collaboration in order to ensure that those migrants do not arrive to the source of the European Union. And it's fine. That's the approach. That's the approach of the member states. The approach the states want securitization of the borders. And of course, the European Union and the approach of the agencies go in that way. Because if we have legislative tests and they have to go through the legislative process and the member states do not agree with the texts that are proposed, then of course they are not going to be adopted. So I hope that answered your question, Manuela. And hi, by the way.
Thank you, Manuela. Any other question? Any other comment? Well, if not, Emilio Almaza, co-director of the LLM, who wants to make the point.
Yes. Thank you very much, David, for your presentation. It was clear. And to me, I must confess that this is a new word. And taking into account that I am not an expert in this field, I would like to make you a question. And you have to remember that I am a traditional criminal lawyer, so my field of knowledge is more related to the domestic field of law in general, and particularly criminal law. And I wonder if those agencies you were talking about, especially EASO and FRONTEX, not Europol, EASO and FRONTEX, plays any kind of role in the field of crime investigation. Not only as a witnesses, because maybe they can see that some that type of crime is being committed, but they play any other kind of role in the criminal prosecution, for instance?
Not that I'm aware directly, but what we see is that, for instance, or Europol will have a clear role in that way, but what they have in the hotspots, for instance, is that the Frontex and EASO, they detect any type of crime that has been committed for them of arriving there. So, migrant smuggling, trafficking. So, of course, Frontex and EASO, they're going to go through interviews for a purpose. So, the interviews of EASO are going to go in order to determine asylum of the individual, and Frontex in order to determine how they have arrived, all those type of things. But of course, in those interviews, some information that might be worth it for national criminal investigations, all that information, of course, is shared with the member states. So that's the good thing of the hotspots. All this information that is gathered, it is going to be transmitted and it's going to be shared between all the authorities, or among all the authorities that are deployed on the ground. So among the member states, the agencies, international organizations that are also deployed on the ground. So that was the key point of the European Commission putting forward the hotspots, to share all this information. Why? Because otherwise Frontex might hear something in one interview, but this is not shared with the national authorities who are precisely researching something or an ongoing criminal investigation. So that's all I know in that extent. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, any other question? Any other comment? No? Okay, well, it's time, it's 2 o'clock, so we are supposed to finish. First of all, thank you, David, for a brilliant presentation. The book is fantastic, and also focus on a very timely topic, a very hot topic. And also thank you for your participation to the audience. There is another. Oh yeah,
this was a very interesting presentation.
Okay, good. So thank you very much, and see you soon. Because as part of the LLM, we will organize more seminars, more presentation of books, and you will get information about it. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.